Hello and welcome back to the Unstoppable Dad Project. This week I was lucky enough to sit down with Brad Wilson. Brad's a father of two. He's a jack of all trades. He is just an all-round, genuine, great human being. I have been blessed enough, lucky enough to call Brad a friend for the best part of the last decade. Brad is the type of person that anybody who meets him, anybody who comes across him, would never say an ill word about him. He is one of the most genuine, caring people that I know. He's a great father, he's a great husband, and he's just an all-around great guy. So I really enjoyed the conversation that we had. We started off talking about how Brad prioritizes time for his own health, and then we went down a few different rabbit holes talking about winning and losing, the type of values that we are trying to instill in our children, and it was a really, really great conversation that I enjoyed having with a good friend of mine. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy having it. Those of you that are listening, please make sure you like, share, subscribe. Help us build this thing. Share it with your friends. Share it with people that you think might get some value from it or that would just enjoy listening to it. The more people we can get to do that, the more we can grow this thing, and the more we can hopefully get this message out to other dads to try and help them become their own version of unstoppable. All right, on to my conversation with Brad. Hope you enjoy it. Have a great day. Let's go. Hello, mate.
Hello.
What's happening?
Not much, mate. Just finished the workout. 5:30 a.m. Got to get things done. Earlier the better.
It's when you do the majority of your working out, right?
Yes. It's just, I don't know, just what fits in with the family, and you got to make it work. I like the mornings anyway. I think by the afternoon you want to get home and you want to see the kids, and my energy levels are pretty low in the afternoon anyway because you've had a big day. So I like getting in and getting it done and feeling good for the rest of the day. So, yeah.
You were always a morning workout person though, like even before you had kids, right?
Yeah, that's true actually, now that you say that. Although I remember back when, in the early days when we were gym rat lifting monkeys, I used to do morning and afternoon. I used to come in and do, the double sesh, just when I had lots more energy and time, obviously.
So like we knew each other, obviously pre-kids, we've known each other for a while. And yeah, from what I remember, you always kind of had that time in the morning, even before you had kids. You guys were, because you and Lise both started training with us, and then both of you would come in the morning, I think.
I think you're right. Like, I don't know, I've done a lot of surfing, and I've always done like morning sports, morning activities and stuff like that. So it kind of just worked in. It felt natural to do morning sessions rather than afternoons. It's a good question. Other than that, I don't really know why we picked 5:30 a.m. You talk to some people and they're just like, "What the fuck are you doing at 5:30 a.m.?" Like, it's still dark especially through winter. I like it, and it's like speaking family stuff, kids stuff. It works for us at the moment that I piss off early in the morning and Shep, gets the kids up and she feeds them and she gets to work at 8 o'clock or something like that and works through till 4:30. Or I start a bit earlier. I go straight from here to work, start a bit earlier, finish a bit earlier, and then I pick the kids up and we have our afternoons together with the kids, and Lisa does her own thing on the way home from her work, and that works. It's good. It's got a good balance at the moment. So
I think the afternoons are a bit more chaotic though, right?
Oh fuck yeah! I think Shep's got the good. Don't tell her, but I think I got the shit end of the stick.
But in saying that, like I'm generally not home in the mornings either. Yeah. So and it's funny because I bring that up because for you, I know like you've traditionally been a morning person, like when you fit those workouts in.
Yeah.
For me, I've been the other way around, but I've actually switched recently over the last 12 months to doing the stuff, not the stuff in the gym, but my jiu-jitsu, and I've switched to doing it in the morning. And I've actually found, despite the first couple of weeks being very low energy because I'm just kind of not used to moving, doing something strenuous at that time of day, I've found from a scheduling point of view that that's been better for me, and the decision to do that was probably more professional rather than it was personal, just because we've got this thing going, we've got a lot more online stuff happening, so I really needed the middle of the day when I was training. But one of the other reasons for that was obviously personal, and having those afternoons, like the afternoons I don't have to be at work, I'm not having to stay around to do a session, I'm not having to go and do a session, I can kind of get it done and get it going. And
you don't have to feel like you're cramming everything into the afternoon too. Once it's done in the morning, it's, I don't know, you just feel like you're on top of things.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But I mean, it's horses for courses, right? Like,
for sure.
People, everyone's going to be different. Just because it works for one doesn't mean it works for the other. But I guess a trend that I've noticed a little bit, and where it was interesting with you, because it was always you, from the moment you kind of started doing some structured training with us, that was always kind of the time that you prioritized it, and through, a couple of different job changes and different stages of your life, even though you've done morning and afternoon, that's kind of always been a constant. So it's interesting that the fact that you've had that prioritized even before you've had kids, you've managed to kind of keep that all the way through. Whereas some people try to change it. Like I've changed it, but obviously our kids are getting a little bit older now. It's just interesting that for you've managed to keep that, like, that consistency and that priority.
To be honest, I've never really thought about it until you just addressed it then. I've never really thought that much into it. But yeah, you're totally right. That's what worked for me, and I knew when kids came, into the picture, I knew that that's a time that, exactly what you just said, that I prioritise, and I make that my hour. It's an hour, like, at the end of the day, that's all it is every day. But that's my hour, and that's when I feel the best in the morning. I'm more alive, I'm more alert. And you just, it's obviously works, and I've kept it up, and I've kept that priority very important for me throughout, as throughout kids, throughout a lot of ups and downs throughout the last 5-10 years. Or how long have it been? I think I was talking to someone the other night, actually. 2013 was when I started.
So 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's been a priority every morning almost.
Yeah, but it's consistency as well too.
Yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
And like for you now, having 2 kids, who take up a lot of your time. It doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter what your profession is. If you're invested in your kids' development, your kids are always going to take up a lot of your time and mental energy. But having that, for now, for you, it's just 3 hours a week.
Yep.
Prioritizing that time. And the thing is, what you've done in the past before kids has been able to carry over to what you've done now. And I think that's important. I think I deal with a lot of people, not just dads, who, when they have kids, they try and change up what they were doing dramatically beforehand from a scheduling point of view. There's probably a reason why you fell into that schedule prior. Then what? And when you try and change it afterwards, it can become a little bit too much because you've got so many other changes. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you were training 6 days a week before you had kids, you're going to be able to do that. But dropping back to maybe 3 or even 2 for some people, and not trying to change that schedule, sometimes is going to work. Whereas other people are going to need to change it because when they were doing it isn't going to work now. But the biggest thing is it's been a priority for you, like, all the time. And I mean, you can speak on that, how much that's helped you from, specifically a mental standpoint.
I think it's the familiarity of it as well. Like, I'm used to training at that time of the morning, and exactly what you said, there's so many changes in your life when kids come into the picture, that was something that, I knew was a consistent thing in my life. And, obviously you crave spending time with your kids, and everything's all exciting and new when you have children, but that was something that I looked forward to because, it felt familiar. It was my, like I keep saying, it was my hour. And yes, it's probably dropped from 6 to 3. times per week, but that's enough. That keeps me going, and you know, I look forward to it. You know.
But I mean, that comes down to, I'm sure, what you want out of your training has shifted pretty dramatically too,
Yeah,
right?
definitely, absolutely. Yeah, it's not important to me to be able to lift ridiculous amounts of weight. Not that I ever lifted ridiculous amounts of weight. You know, that's not a priority for me anymore. It's being able to move, being able to function enough that I can play with my kids without, you know, for people that don't know me very well, I've had a lot of back issues over the last few years. So that's, you know, looking after that has been a high on my priority list. But just shifting from weights and numbers and, you know, even a weight on a bloody set of scales, that's not important at all to me anymore. It's that having enough strength and enough energy to be able to keep up with the kids and do it pain-free. That's sort of where I'm at in my head with my training. And 3 hours a week is more than enough to get me there. So, you know, that's where I am, and it's working. I feel good. I feel really good.
But and I think one big thing that happens for a lot of people where they make that shift and it's a really hard thing. It's a hard jump for people to make, because you have kids and your world revolves around these people, like these little people. You've got an extra mouth to feed. When it's in the very early stages, you've obviously got your partner or your wife that you've got to help, you know, with things that maybe don't have to do with the kids, and you get so stuck on them that you forget about us. But the thing is, when people, and you kind of just spoke to this, you shifted that reason why you wanted to do it for, I want to do this for my own output, to lift more weight, so on and so forth, to get stronger and things like that. And it's a reason that's for you to a reason that's for somebody else.
Your driver changes.
Yeah, I'm being driven by, I want to do this to be more capable for my children.
Yep.
But I think the missing piece for a lot of people where things start to slip off is they think by not taking that time for themselves, they're not going, like, they're moving further away from their end goal. Like, I want to do this and I want to be fit for my kids.
Yep.
But I can't afford the 3 hours a week to do it, because that's taking time away from the kids.
Yep.
But if you've got injuries, you've got things that you need to deal with, and these things start mounting up, taking that 3 hours out is almost going to give you some time back in the quality of time that you're going to be able to spend with them. Right?
Absolutely. It's almost like an investment. If I was to put a word to explaining exactly what you're trying to say just here, I think it's investment, because you invest a little bit of time in yourself, and it is only a little bit of time when you break down how, 3 hours per week over the course of an entire week. It's not a lot of time, but the energy levels that you get from it, and the endorphins that you get from moving, exercising, it does translate into how you act and how you are with your children, even to the point of, I'm just making shit up, but it makes sense in my head. The way you discipline your children, all right? I find that when I am fit and when I am healthy and when I am sound of mind, I can discipline my kids better, because I'm not flying off the handle, like I'm more focused about how my actions are presented to my kids. So, maybe my heart rate's lower, and I don't yell at Aggie for doing something ridiculous that doesn't need to be, be yelled at. So, yeah, I don't know. I obviously haven't got any citations to back that up, but it makes sense to me that it's an investment of how you're acting with your kids by doing something like this in here, I think.
But I think too, as males, like, we crave physicality, right?
For sure.
Like, And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out there and fight somebody, but...
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody needs to look after their body, right? But we're more specifically talking about males. And I think as males, given that naturally we have high testosterone to women, we want physicality. We want to be able to express our body and move our body in a way where we're, almost getting rid of some of that tension and that testosterone that builds up naturally within the male body.
Yep.
And it would make sense that when you are allocating time to do that, when a situation arises where you would normally, like those anger levels are going to rise, you've kind of dispelled some of that through physical activity, so you're going to be less reactive when that happens. You're going to be more... But plus, there's also the side of things that when you do something difficult, you're able to process stress better.
Yep.
Like if you're consistently putting yourself in difficult situations, whether that be putting yourself underneath a heavy barbell or just doing something uncomfortable because, you're not going to want to show up to the gym every day. You're not going to want to, the program says go on back squat. You're not going to want to go, you may not want to go on back squat, but you go and do it anyway.
Yep.
That in itself is a difficult task,
mental battle,
right?
Yeah.
And I think by doing that, it enables us as men not only to get some of that testosterone out in a productive way, in a way which is obviously going to feed a lot of things in our body and our mind. The physiological response that happens from that is there as well, but it helps with that. But also too, doing something where you're under pressure, you're under strain, and that's going to be relative for everybody, makes us less reactive in those situations as well too.
I think it's a weird thing to try and explain, but I think I've been craving those kind of situations as well since having kids. And I don't really know how to explain it, but like some of the goals, we always talk about putting goals on the board and having something to work towards, but some of the things that I relish at the moment is just having ridiculous tasks put in front of me and then trying to either figure them out or, like for example, one of my goals that I put on the board after having kids was like kayak across the Pacific. Like, what kind of a fucked up goal is that? But it's that sense of accomplishment. Something has been triggered in me since having kids. It's only really been since having kids that I want to be put in these situations that I need to test myself, and I think I think there's a relationship between that and actually parenting children, because that in itself is a very hard task. And if I can do that, I can do that sort of thing is perhaps the way I'm seeing it. But yeah, I just find myself wanting to do ridiculous things at the moment. I don't know why.
Do you also think maybe though that's a little bit of you want to set an example?
Yes, I was thinking about this too the other day, that example setting. I don't know what the catalyst was for me thinking about it, but definitely how you model yourself to your children. Actually, that's what it was. It was another one of Aggie's stick her head out the door and go, "Daddy, where's my fucking toy?" or something like that. It's like, oh my God, these children are just sponges. They just absorb everything that you do. And, I want to be a really good role model for my children. And yeah, you're probably 100% right. Maybe that's why I'm relishing these things, is because I want to show them that I can do these things. And,
But also too, I 100% get that, but I think for me personally, like, I think it's gone to kind of the next level when it comes to, like, since I've had kids, but I've kind of always been that person where I know that as long as I put myself into situations where I need to just work shit out. Like, one thing that the last 12 months over COVID has really taught me about me is I actually tend to work better when shit's sideways. Like, I tend to get more focused and I tend to just like hone in on exactly what needs to be done. Whereas when things are pretty good, I tend to get a little bit lazy with
Yep.
what I'm doing, and I feel, I guess, uninspired.
Yep.
But when it comes to the kids, one thing that I've kind of told myself is, firstly, I want to make sure I'm physically capable to look after them, not just from the point of view of, you know, putting food on the table and things like that. But if something happened, if they were put in a bad situation, like, am I going to be able to either defend them, or am I going to be able to, you know, do what needs to be done in a physical manner to do that? And I think that there's always that element when it comes, I think that's a primitive thing that is just in us as fathers. Like, if you give a fuck about your kids, like, you should be able to defend them and defend your family. And that's kind of another conversation. But also too, what I believe is, by putting ourselves in these almost what seem like insurmountable situations, when we know that these kids are watching, right? And then there's two sides to that. Being able to conquer that shows them that if you put your mind to it and you apply yourself, you can do this.
A bit of resilience.
Yeah. But also too, I actually think there's another side to that as well too. And one thing that I've, I guess, been pondering on a lot lately is showing them that it's okay to fail, and it's okay to set a goal and not be able to achieve that, but it's then what you do afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, not just sitting in a heap and crying about it and being like, hey, I'm a piece of shit, I couldn't get to what I set out to do. But it's like, all right, how do I readjust, I reset, and I keep moving forward from here? And I think putting ourselves in these situations where we can do that not only starts everything firing in a way where we kind of get honed in on the task at hand, and sometimes we need that to stay motivated, but also too, from the point of view of the role that we're, or the thing that we're showing to our kids is, hey, like, you can do these things if you really want to.
Yep.
Put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You know, look at dad potentially making a fool of himself, or like doing something that he maybe knows deep down that he's not going to be able to do, but I'm going to give it like a real red hot crack. Anyway, it's like,
Aggie said something the other day, actually, so I got roped into doing the Mooloolaba mile swim with 2 days' notice, and I did it. And Aggie came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, Daddy, did you win?" I was like, "No, darling." She went, "Oh, why not?" I said, "Well, just it doesn't really matter, but you know, I didn't train for it. I didn't prepare myself for it. Like, but it's not the end of the world anyway." And you could just see her little head ticking away, just going like, "No, but you're my dad. You should have won." So I think that was a bit humbling for both of us, really. But yeah, she's got this thing, like, and there's nothing that we've done. Maybe it's something that's happened at daycare, I don't know. But she's just got this thing all of a sudden about winning. Everything's got to be winning. Did you win? And so that in itself, I think, it made me look at what kind of almost values that I'm showing and I'm modelling to the kids as well. And that resilience about not winning, or not being the best at something is okay, but you work, you get yourself back up and you work at it. And I said to Aggie that maybe next year I'll try again, and I'll train for it this time, and that's important. But yeah, digging deeper into what kind of values you're modelling for your kids is something I've been pondering a lot lately too, and it's a rabbit hole, hey, like.
But the whole winning and losing thing in today's society, right? Like, when we were kids, you go and do a race, there's first, second, and third, and if you don't get third, like, if you're not on the podium, then tough shit. That's just it. But we're in a time where there's participation trophies and things like that. And it's funny because Soph's got cross country at school today.
Yeah, right.
And we were having a talk about it last night. And she said to me, I can't even remember, she said, "I'm not faster than someone." Because obviously they must run around in the playground. And I'm like, and she goes, "So I'm not going to beat her because I'm not faster than her." And my favourite throwaway line when somebody says I can't do something is not with that attitude, which I probably shouldn't say to my daughter, but I did. It's almost like it's just this natural reaction I've got in me now. And but then I sat down and we talked to her, and I'm like, you know, when you're running a race, when you're doing anything, don't be focused on what everyone else is doing. Just be focused on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, apply yourself and go and, like, you apply yourself the best you can. If that means you win, great. You win. But you can't... And this is not only, like, a lesson for the kids. Like, this is a lesson for everybody, because people I think people stop themselves from putting themselves in a competition environment because they are so worried about what the outcome's going to be at the end of it. And this is being somebody that's played sport pretty much my whole life. But the one thing is, until I started competing in jiu-jitsu, I'd never really done like an individual, contact sport. And starting to compete and played football and like done contact sports and even individual sports like weightlifting and things like that. But with a individual contact sport, like it's you and that other person. And one thing that got highlighted to me is like, I can't control what preparation that person's had. I can't control how much time. Like, I can control my controllables, and then whatever happens on the day happens on the day. I'm gonna win, and some days I'm going to get there. And if I apply myself and I, play my best game and I still lose, and in the preparation up to that point, I've done everything in my power that I'm able to do. I haven't skipped out on trainings. I've applied myself in the way, and I've done everything to prepare myself for that event, and I still lose. Then, while me as a person, like, I fucking hate losing. Like, it's funny because some people get driven by winning. I feel like I'm almost the other direction, where I get motivated by not losing.
Yeah.
And as long as I do everything up until that point and I apply myself on the day, the outcome is inconsequential.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the conversation. When you try and have the conversation like this with a 5.5-year-old, I think 99% of it goes over her head. Yeah. But the promising thing was she walked away from that and she goes, I'm just going to try my hardest. And I'm like, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. I think she's got enough of me in her that, like, she's going to want to win, because, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it all comes down to the way you win and the way you lose, and the work you've done to get to that point.
And the fact that you're having these conversations with a 5.5-year-old already, I think is the most important thing, because, you're instilling those values really young, and they're going to keep going through their life, and they're going to keep assessing situations like that with those values. So, that's all you can do. We're trying to build good humans here. That's all you can do.
And I think too, like, sometimes it almost seems fruitless when you start having these conversations, but one thing I've noticed over the last month, actually a couple of months now, she's almost finished her first term at school, but since Soph started school, is from here on out, I'm actually going to be less influential in her life than her teachers and a circle of friends.
Yeah.
And while that cuts me to the core, it means that I don't want to sit there and lecture her 24/7, but if I can have some of these conversations with her and she can take away like that one thing, we might have a 10-minute conversation and she walks away and she goes, I'm just going to try my hardest.
Yeah.
And she can remember those types of things, then at least I can have that positive influence, so that when she's put in situations where I'm not there, she can draw back on those things that we've spoken about.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing, I think, is because there's never going to be a right time to have those conversations. And it's so hard to let the kids just go and do their own thing and potentially fail and be hurt and do but
if they watch you do it, like, maybe that's the reason for these ridiculous situations that, I'm chasing. If they watch you do it and they watch you battle with something that you potentially aren't going to win, but you lose gracefully and you pick yourself up and you show resilience, then even if they do only take 10% of that on board, then that's awesome. And that's, for me anyway. That's all I want for my kids is just to be good people. I couldn't give a fuck if they win or lose or whatever. They're just how they carry themselves when they do lose, if they do lose, is more important to me. And I don't remember having those types of conversations with my parents. That's another thing I've been diving into lately is the things that my kids are viewing me, like what was my childhood like, and did I have these types of conversations that I'm having with my kids, and do the things the values that I have, and the way that I am as a person, that's built off your own childhood and from your own parents. And that's a deep dark hole to dive into, and I've been working through that recently, and it's really made me think about how I am with my children, and just the way that I handle situations. That's worth a whole nother podcast, that one.
But I mean,
it's a rabbit hole.
You're always gonna question what you didn't have. You're always gonna look for what you didn't have and what was wrong, and try and. But I get that train of thought, because I'm the same. But we were brought up by a different generation in a different time. It's just the way it is, and our kids are going to be bringing their kids up in a different time with a different set of skills to what we are. And it's an interesting topic and concept, but like one of the things that I look at is what's the good stuff that I know. And now when you have kids, because when you're a kid, especially when you're a teenager, like, you think your parents are fucking stupid. Like, you just do. Yeah. Like, but when you get older, and especially when you have your own kids, a lot of it starts to make sense. And it starts to make sense as to why they told you things, why they did things and stuff like that. It's
like those, that line, you'll understand when you're older type shit. It's like, now I am actually understanding.
Now I get it, right?
Right.
But, I look at what are the things that my parents did that taught me that now, like, I can look back in an objective way, not an emotional teenage way, or a headstrong 20-year-old male way, and go like, that's why. Like, and transfer those lessons to your kids, rather than the stuff that you didn't get taught, that you wish you had have been taught. You can then pass that on to your kids, and then that's and that's the thing. I think the hardest thing for me personally is to try and not give it to them too easily.
Oh yeah,
because you want to give them everything. You want to give them all the information. You want to give them all the stuff. But that's not going to help them. Like, I keep thinking further, like, my mind goes for, like, you're 18, you've got this decision to make. I'm not going to be there. How do I make sure I give you the right tools now that even if you make the wrong decision, it's not going to be so far wrong that there's going to be dire consequences, And that's the hardest part. You can never crystal ball that stuff, but
it's giving them choices early, I think, and then showing them that there are consequences to every choice that they make, good or bad. I think that's they may hate it at the time, and especially when they're teenagers, like you say, they just want stuff. You don't, like, imagine, asking your parents for something and they go, well, would you like this or would you like that? And they say, no, just fucking give it to me.
Yeah.
They're going to hate it, but, it'll be one of those, you'll understand when you're older type things.
Yeah, parenting kids, eh?
Yeah, man.
Joys of having little ones. What's the biggest thing you think you've struggled with since you become a dad?
Holy shit, that is a huge question. Mental health for me. Seriously. Like, you and I have had that many conversations over the last 5 years about just battling demons, battling things it's brought it all to the surface for me with kids. Like, I've always been in, I was always one of those emo, moody teenager type, young adult type people. But yeah, it's really brought that mental health stuff to the surface for me, and I think I've been trying to understand why, and I do think it's because it's those values, those fundamental values that I know my kids are looking at me and potentially seeing through me, and I want to make sure that the way that I am portraying myself to them is a genuine way, a genuine thing. And when you really open up those layers, looking at what those fundamental values are in you, all of those demons come out as well. And yeah, I don't know, I can't put my finger on what's really going on upstairs, but for me it's been mental health stuff. It's been hard to deal with, really, really hard to deal with. And thankfully I've had people like you in my life that I can lean on and talk to, and just talking about stuff helps for me. Verbalizing issues rather than just keeping it in your head and coming up with ridiculous things that maybe don't transpire anyway. So just getting it out and talking to someone has been amazingly helpful. But yeah, I think that's probably the number one for me.
It's super common. I mean, it's obviously I did the podcast on it a couple of weeks ago, and I think, from what you've just said, one of the hardest things to get around is when you do have kids, it magnifies everything that you think about yourself.
Yeah.
And it also shows you areas where maybe you were lying to yourself about certain things. And I think that can get better or worse as they get older, because not only does that mirror and that magnification then becomes external in them, because you see them display the same traits as you, whether it be like a short temper, or it be like, just the way they respond to particular things, the way they communicate with people. You see all that stuff because you can fool people to a point. Like, you can act with people at work. You can even, like, people can even act with their spouse because but when it comes to your kids, they are so glued in and locked in on you, especially as the male role model. And like you mentioned, where Aggie was shocked that you didn't win, it's probably because in her eyes, like, you're the superhero. You're her superhero. This is my dad who can do anything. And that's okay for her to see you fail. That doesn't mean you have to go and do everything. But, when you have somebody scrutinizing, like, it is. Like, they're scrutinizing they're not being critical, but they are watching every single thing you do, because they look at you and they want to be you. Like, that and then when you start to see them, like, that can be a very hard thing to get over if you're not confident with where you are. And it's sometimes hard to get to a point where you are confident with where you are when you've got all these extra, your mind's so fixated on everything that's wrong rather than everything that's right. And so it's such a hard thing, because you've got to be mindful of, like, sometimes the things that are wrong, like if there's not enough money, like where the money's coming from, if there's, if you're not feeling like you're in a physical, like a good physical, like, you've got to be worried about that stuff. But I mean, for me, like you said, the talking's the biggest thing.
My brother's, we spoke earlier, my brother's about to have a baby this week as well. And he lives out at Roma now, so he's 6 hours away, so I don't get to see him very often anymore. We were really close, growing up, and then through our sort of young adult years, and then, things happen, obviously. We've got my own kids, and you just sort of drift apart a little bit. But yeah, I've reached out to him and started conversations sort of, just, you never really know if you're ready for kids or not, but it's just the things that I've learned, the things that we've spoken about, and the things you talk about on these podcasts anyway, it's given me stuff to talk to him about and sort of gauge where he's at as well. I think that's been really, I hope, will be really beneficial for him when it all happens. It was funny, that conversation we were having the other day was he was really worried about, because he works for Energex, he works at a fairly high risk job, and he was really worried that he's got to go back to work after the maternity leave, whatever you call it, paternity leave, and be on call and getting up at 2 a.m. and then doing his job and coming home, and then coming home at ridiculous hours and maybe being tired and not being able to help with the baby and all this kind of shit. And like, dude, your schedule is going to go out the fucking window the minute you have this baby anyway. Like, it's not going to matter if you work at 2 a.m. or you work at 9 a.m. Like, it's going to be all over the shop. And
baby don't care when your work hours is.
But we had that conversation about being, as hard as brutal as it sounds, being useless for the first 6 months with, regards to bringing up the baby. And I was like, you just gotta get your house in order and look after, your wife and make sure that everything is there and the environment is safe for your wife and the baby. Like, that's your role, and you just gotta suck it up. He's as soft and gooey as I am. He wants to do everything. He wants to help the baby, and he'll want to breastfeed if he could, and that kind of shit. But it's a tough pill to swallow, and that was a big, that's part of my mental health stuff as well, was swallowing that ego and being useless. And probably, now that I think about it, tying it all in, maybe that's why I've signed myself up for all these ridiculous fucking triathlons and stuff that I do to put these mountains in front of me that I want to try and climb, because you go through this period of feeling useless and questioning, what is my purpose here? And it's really hard when you don't have a good support network around and you have these types of conversations, which is why I want to talk to my brother before it happens, and so he's not.
But everyone has such a different journey, right? Like, and it's funny because when I did the podcast with Corey, and then I did the podcast on my own mental health, and one of the biggest things that it's almost back to our conversation about like winning and losing, right? It's like you can only control the controllables, and in that early stage of parenting, like as a dad, you can't control when the baby sleeps. You can't control the fact that you weren't born with a set of milk-producing breasts. Like, you can't control that stuff. But like what you said, like you used the term, like, get your house in order.
Yeah.
There's other stuff that you can control. You can control, like, helping out with the cleaning and helping out with that, like, doing that stuff if your schedule allows it to. And I think one of the biggest things that leads to like this uncertainty and I guess this feeling of being lost in inadequacy is, yes, we want like to be physically there in the baby's life, and when we're not like physically there as much as what our partner or our wife is, that can lead to that. But looking back on it now, and this kind of thought's only really just dawned on me, I think I was unaware at the things I could control, and I spent far too much time focusing on the things that I couldn't control, or the things that I had. It doesn't matter how hard I tried, I was going to have zero impact on that stuff. And I think for new dads, if you can learn that skill early on of going, hey, like I've got control over these things, and these are the actions I can take, because I think action for a lot of people quells that feeling of inadequacy, because you're actually doing something. We're physical beings, we need to be moving. Whereas if you're sitting there and dwelling on the stuff that you can't do, you just get caught in this spiral. And that's where identifying that stuff, talking to people who have been there before, like your brother talking to you, even though his journey is going to be vastly different to yours, he like being able to go, oh, like, okay, this is, I'm preempting a little bit that this is what it's going to be like. Still going into it with an open mind because it's going to be different, but hey, these are the things I've got control over. So I'm going to focus on doing this stuff and moving this stuff. Because I know for me, like looking back on that was one thing. Like I was so busy focused on the things that, and whenever I look at, and this is just for me personally, when it comes to like fatherhood, when it comes to mental health, everyone has such a varying, they're running their own race. They're in their own journey, right?
Yep.
But when I spend all the time focusing on the things I can't control, that's when I get caught in these spirals of like, you know, I can't get out of this.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
of course I can't get out of it because I have no input. Doesn't matter what action I take, I'm not going to have impact on those factors that I'm focusing on.
Yep.
And it's interesting because, you know, had I been told something like that early on, it may have saved me a lot of, may not have, might have just been something I had to learn, you know, the hard way. I had to go through that process myself, and maybe we all do.
Maybe.
But
And that's I guess the reasons why I wanted to have these conversations with my brother as well, is not to necessarily say this is going to happen to you, you need to do this, you know, like exactly what you just said. Everybody runs their own race, and you know, my wife and I are very careful not to give advice to anybody about children at all, ever, because, you know, every child is different. And I know you've talked about this previously anyway, but it's just more that, you know, it's the conversation. It really is. When you come back to it and you simplify it all, it's just having conversations with people and say, how are you dealing with this? How are you going? You know, and Kev hasn't even had his baby yet, and I'm already having some conversations with him. So, yeah, and it's only really because of, honestly, talking to you and what you're doing with this podcast and this whole Unstoppable Dad project is why I want to have conversations with him, because I know how important it is, and you know, so yeah.
like I know it's just a common theme I keep going through on here, but
Yeah.
you just have to talk. And
Yep.
you know, I know one thing that does hold people back is like they feel like they're being a bother, but
Yeah.
you're not. Like, you're absolutely not. And the other thing is too, I think by being open and honest, and you having a conversation with somebody who's potentially in the same, like the good thing that about our friendship is that our kids are pretty close to the same age. Like Soph's year and a bit older than Aggie, but you know, but Morgan and Ollie are pretty well bang on the same age.
Yep.
So we've kind of been able to go through this together, and I know from the point of view of me opening up and talking to you specifically and other people, when sometimes when I've come to you and started talking, it kind of sparks something back the other way too. And just like you talking to somebody and opening up about your experience and what you're feeling
Yep.
may actually help them more than it helps you.
Definitely.
You know, and I think as men, especially from like our generation and
Yeah.
back to like the way we were parented and
Yeah.
things like that, there was a lot of good, I feel, around like resiliency and things like that from the way we were parented. That I think, you know, and this is a whole nother conversation about the what, like, you know, maybe people not being as resilient now,
Yeah.
but that's also led to this stigma around opening up about how you're feeling,
Yep.
which for some people can have dire consequences. And I think when you open up an open line of communication with somebody you trust who's potentially going through the same thing as you, or who has been through the same thing as you, you know, it can really be good for not just you, but the other. And when somebody's your friend, like truly your friend, you know, I've seen these statuses and this meme going around saying I'd prefer to have an hour-long conversation than listen to, you know, your 15-minute eulogy. Like, and that's true. It's pretty dark and morbid, but I think, I know for me personally, being able to have a conversation with like another dad about like their experience helps me as much as it hopefully helps
Yeah, of course
them
it
as
does.
well too.
And it's funny. I was just thinking when you were talking then, what I spoke about earlier about what did I learn from my parents growing up and looking back at that. and you'd be the same. Like, we've gone through mostly a generation of dads in particular that don't open up. You know, they take things and they bury it deep inside, and they show to their kids that, we're strong people because we don't break down, we don't cry in front of our kids, or all that shit. And I very much struggle to open up to people, because my dad never ever spoke about feelings, never. And it was just drilled into us that you hide your emotions, and we're a very tight knit family, but we never ever spoke about that kind of stuff, that kind of side of life. And it's only recently that I've found the courage to really talk, and it's foreign to me. I've never really spoken to people, and maybe that's why I've had so many battles with mental health and stuff as well, is because I've always just buried it, and it's all coming out, but it's because of these conversations that me and you have all the time, and it's it's got to be a good thing to talk about this kind of stuff, like it has to be, and I'm thankful that I've got a friend like you to talk about all these things with. And I think that's got a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah. But I think too, you can, like you said, you always, like you said it before. Your goal as a parent is to make your children good people.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what physical accolades, academic accolades, like that matters far less than them being good, capable human beings,
Yep.
like, and contributors to society, like the larger society. Like, that's, if you had to put it into a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah. Agreed.
And part of that is being open and honest with how you're doing and how you're feeling, and being able to talk to people, and being able to, articulate that and reciprocate that, and being that, that doesn't mean that, like, don't get me wrong, like, you don't have to you don't go around complaining about everything, but it's okay to talk to people.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for something to be wrong. What you do, it's the same as winning and losing. Like, what you do after that is really going to define, like, what the next step is going to be for you. You have a conversation with somebody, they give you some advice around things that may have worked for them. Maybe if you're stuck in this loop where it's not changing, go and try what they've said.
Yeah.
You do what you do, you keep doing what you're doing, and you're going to keep getting what you're getting, and that's where, changing that habit and that behavior around opening up and talking to people, if you're finding that you're constantly in your own head, then that's something that's a habit that needs to change. And it's not just, I'm sure it's not just you and I think, like you said, I think it was that the way we were brought up, that was it. And that still doesn't mean you can't be a physical, tough, masculine man if you're talking about your feelings. The exact opposite. Yeah. I think, like,
you're more well-rounded.
Masculinity is a term that gets, like, dragged over the coals far too much in today's society, but that's, being able to communicate with your friends and your wife and your partner and your children as well too, and showing them that that's okay.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing for us, why we still, and I still do to this day, get this uneasy feeling when you start talking about it, because we didn't see it. It wasn't behaviour that we seen. And that's again, like, that's from generations beforehand.
I saw that with my dad's dad as well. Like, I remember being very young and seeing him and how he interacted with his dad, and it has really awoken something in me that those kind of values, if you want to call them that, or habits, let's say, need to change from me to my son. Especially if we're on the topic of modeling stuff to your son, and the dad-son relationship. That's a big one for me, is modeling that it's healthy and it's good to be open and to talk about your feelings, but still be masculine at the same time. Like, that's another conversation we could go into. Is I've never been a really, like, I'm skinny as a fucking rake. Like, I've never been an alpha male type thing, but starting that training and with you in here in this gym has been something that's given me confidence too, and maybe that's why I've stuck and it's been a priority for me to keep those 3 sessions per week going, because it gives me confidence. It rounds you out as a dad, perhaps.
For sure. Like, you've got to you have to be physically capable. Like, as a man and as a human being. I truly believe that. And obviously, of course, I'm going to say that. Like, I've owned a gym for the last 10 years.
Yep.
But you have to be physically capable. And I'm not even talking about you have to be a particular weight, you have to do this. Like, you have to be able to get yourself from point A to point B, be physically capable, and especially when you're a parent, you have to be able to help your children, physically be able to help your children. Like,
I think it's about problem solving too. You have to be able to solve any problem that comes your way, whether it's physical or emotional or whatever. So you can't be too extreme one or the other.
But the more physically fit you are, the better equipped you're going to be to deal with that other stuff.
Yep.
If you feel confident in yourself
Yep.
and your own ability, like you mentioned the word alpha, right? Like, and it's funny because I was listening to a podcast and the guy on there said, if you need to read a book to tell you how to be an alpha male, you're not an alpha male. Like, and you never will be. Like,
alpha
that's
males
just
can't read.
That's well, maybe they can't, but that's just the way it is. Like, and but I don't like alpha or whatever you want to call it. Like, to be a leader in your family, I truly believe that part of that is like your physical capability, and that doesn't mean you have to go around and fight everybody, or like, it's not like, we're not living in Sparta where you have to be the toughest guy there kicking people down wells or anything like that. But if you're you want to be able to go and play with your kids and run up the playground and swing on the monkey bars with them and lift them up to go on the monkey bars, or they want to go up to the high slide. Like, can I help get you up there and things like that?
Imagine how your kid's gonna view you if they ask you to put you up on the high monkey bars and you can't even lift them up.
Yeah. But then what? Back to what we're talking about. Like, what precedence and example does that set for them?
Exactly.
I'm not. I can't do this, so we're just not doing it.
Yep.
And that's the thing. Like, that's what it all comes back to, the conversation that we were just having about, like, what's the example you're setting for them, whether it be physically, whether it be mentally, like talking about your feelings and emotions and having that like those open and honest conversations with your friends and people, and also them too, admitting when you're wrong, like those types of things.
It's okay to lose.
It's okay to lose, You might not like it, but it's okay to lose.
Okay.
But that's cool, man. Before we finish up, because we'll finish up soon, we're almost at an hour. What's the best part of being a dad?
What's the best part about being a dad? I actually think it's seeing when your kids do take on, and I don't know if this is an environment thing or if this is like a genetic thing. I'm not really sure. It's probably both. But when you see the things that you are actually trying to instill in your children, and you see how they react or how they deal with, a random member of the public or their teachers at daycare or whoever, and you see those little things come out and them modeling, these hopefully good behaviors that you're trying to instill in them to someone else, and that feeling of prideness and proudness, that for me just brings a smile to my face every time. Like, that's what I really, really love about having kids. And this whole journey, this whole thing is like, you watch them and how they act and how they react to situations in the real world. That's, I don't know, that proudness feeling for me is, I just love it. I love it so much. Knowing that you've inspired perhaps your kid to do something. I make it a real habit. Like, I consciously make sure I tell my kids that I'm proud of them for things. And you can see that they just cherish it. They love it. Love it. So, I don't know. But being proud, genuinely being proud of your kids it doesn't have to be
No, I get it.
Anything, you know,
I get it.
like.
I'd almost add to that. I think it's one thing to be able to witness it, and it's kind of more. It gives you as a person a little bit more satisfaction when you see it.
Yeah.
But when you get told by somebody that they've been like that when you're not around,
Yeah.
I think that's even better, because it means that what you're doing as a parent is working, and they understand that, even though they could be going through a stage where they are just the absolute biggest royal little shit at home, and then you take them somewhere and you leave them somewhere at school, or like with school, like Soph's teacher tells us how much of a good kid she is, how kind she is to everybody, and she's doing that when we're not around.
Yeah.
So she's not doing it because you know what kids are like if they know you're watching and you're watching with somebody, they're going to try and do something to get your satisfaction, like your approval.
Yeah.
Because they want to be told you're proud of them and things like that, which you should always do. But to be told that when you're not around, that's...
One of Aggie's
completely
daycare
agree.
teachers said to us the other day, one of the kids got dropped off at daycare in her class and was having a real hard time. She might have been new, I can't remember. Was having a real hard time because her mum left, you know, and she was in tears, and none of the daycare teachers could do much to help. And she said Aggie came up to her, gave her a big hug, checked if she was okay, held her hand, and just like buddied her the entire day. It was just like looked after her, you know, like took her under her wing type thing. And anyway, her teacher come and told us this afterwards, and like I almost broke down in tears. Like it's just, that's fucking awesome, you know. It's exactly what you just said. You know, that we were not there. She was not like she was doing it to impress us or anything like that. It was just, she's a good human, you know. And that's what it's all about for me. And just that, oh my God, I was so proud. Love it.
Awesome, man. Well, on that note, we might wrap it up.
Fuck, what a journey.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
No worries. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for
Anytime.
listening. And we'll see you next week. Bye.